나로 따라 이긴 밤을 수놓고
너와 함께 날아가 When I'm without you I'm crazy 자 어서 내 손을 잡아 We are made of each
There's more than one part of this fight. This disease is merciless. It simultaneously tries to take your body and the life you've built. It forces women to choose. How could anyone choose between their lives and their livelihood? Do I pay for the medicine or pay the mortgage? Can I miss a treatment? Or can I afford to miss work? Nobody should have to sit in a chemo chair, worried about how they're going to keep the lights on, or food on the table, or pay the lease on the car. Nobody should. And if we have anything to do with it, nobody will. There are plenty who raise funds for the research, and we thank them for it. But there's another part. Because this fight takes more than medicine. Pink Fund. Real help for the other part of the fight.
Oh, you ready? Oh, you can hear me. Okay, hi. So for those of you who stayed, thank you. I know it's been a long 3 days. I have a couple of disclaimers. Number one, I'm a baby boomer. Number two, I hate PowerPoint. And number three, apart from my BA from the University of Michigan in journalism, the only other initials after my last name are those of my ex-husbands, of which there are two. And I hope I get this right, because I told you, gotta get rid of the video. How do I get rid of the video? Oh, there we go. Told you, hate PowerPoint. Here comes Elizabeth to help me. So, I'm happily a 20-year member of the Third Time's a Charm Club, and this is my husband here, Tom Terrific, and I call him Tom Terrific because he married a twice-divorced, middle-aged woman with 5 children, night sweats, and a mildly demented mother. So I want to give you my little backstory. First of all, I have learned so much from all of you in the last couple of days. The work that I do in the healthcare space is not with respect to medication, it's respect to lost income. When high deductibles and copays collide with lost income, patients are making impossible choices. If any of you ever remember the movie Sophie's Choice, when she had to choose between her son and her daughter who would be killed in the camps, these are some of the choices that patients feel deeply in their soul. On April 1st, 2005, I had traveled to New York City. The company that I had joined as a woman-owned division of their business was on the short list to get the job for Major League Baseball for the All-Star game that was going to be played in my hometown of Detroit that July. I'd had my mammogram a few weeks earlier and was called back for a biopsy. But with never any family history or a lump or a bump, I never considered that I would get the call that rushed me into the sorority that I never wanted to be a member of. So I'm on my cab in the way back to LaGuardia Airport, and I had been through a financially devastating divorce before I met Tom Terrific. I had 5 young children. In fact, just so you know, I had the 5 all with the second husband. Just let me clarify that. And my cell phone rings, and it was a clam phone, and I open it up, and I hear my OBGYN, who delivered all 5 of my children, delivering what for in 2022 will be a death sentence for 43,000 women this year in this country. So I entered treatment, and while my early stage disease was unlikely to take my life, it took my livelihood. And I experienced financial toxicity 8 years before Duke University's Yusuf Zafar and Amy Abernathy coined the term. Without my income and the addition of a $1,300 a month COBRA premium, my house fell into foreclosure. And every 58 days, Ford Credit is calling me and asking me if I plan to make a payment or should they plan to repo my car. And by the end of my treatment, in the third quarter of the calendar year, the utility companies that have been very patient with me were truly threatening shutoffs. But what was more important, see, I went backwards. I told you, PowerPoint loser. That big one. Oh, okay, so I'm sitting in the treatment rooms at my provider, and I'm with a lot of other women like this in treatment for cancer, and I'm listening. And here's what I heard. I can't afford this treatment. I think I'm gonna have to liquidate my IRAs. Or like it was Jessica, I think, who said, I'm gonna have to put my house on the market. I'm gonna have to pull my son home from college. But most egregiously and most concerning was the patients that said, my treatment protocol is gonna outlast my FMLA. I'm gonna lose my job. I can't lose my job. So I'm going to quit treatment and go back to work. And it was then, in the midst of the mess that my husband and I were dealing with, that I had the aha moment. Why isn't somebody doing something about this? I guess I should. And so think about Ted Lasso and that whole believe thing. 17 years ago, I go home to my husband, Tom Terrific, and I said, I think we should start this nonprofit that will make these non-medical bills directly to patients' creditors for 90 days to provide them with a financial bridge so they can breathe and figure out what they're going to do next. And he looked at me and he said, are you nuts? No. What are you thinking? Well, because he sleeps with the boss, he went along with it. So we traded our kitchen table literally for our heart and ribbon logo. We got a donated website, and the health reporter at the Detroit Free Press, where I'd once been an executive, wrote a front page story on what I was trying to do. And that story launched on October 2nd, 2006. And 27 newspapers, back then there were newspapers, picked the story up. And by the spring of 2007, our all-volunteer, bootstrapped, give away the kitchen table organization was delivering its first grants. The Pink Fund does one simple thing. We provide financial assistance for housing, transportation, utilities, and insurance paid directly to patients' creditors with caps between $3,000 and $6,000. And here you can see kind of our growth through the years. In this last year, despite coming out of the pandemic, sort of, we hit that $1 million mark. And we're very pleased that as a national organization, we have two significant corporate partners. One is Ford Motor Company, who took us national in 2012. So let's talk about listening. Have any of you seen this guy, Ricky? So Ricky is in the kitchen of his home with his mom, Linda, and he is pleading vociferously, emphatically, for a cupcake. And Linda is over-talking him. And Ricky is over-talking Linda. And we'll talk about this cupcake idea later, but it just reminds me of how patients feel. Some of us are vociferous, some of us are emphatic, some of us feel bold enough to speak to our physicians and care team about our concerns. But others of us are quietly fuming and angry and upset and afraid that if they share their concerns, they won't get the best treatment. So I'm a big vision board person, and in 2014, I learned of a radiation oncologist at the University of Michigan, my alum, Dr. Reshma Jagsi, and she and her colleague, Dr. Laila Gharzai, agreed to do a study using Pink Fund patients. And they wanted to learn about what had happened to the patient voice. So, see, you can't read this stuff, but anyway, patient voices and insights lead to solutions on an individual level. They identified expectations as a novel theme. In other words, when we manage expectations with people right out of the gate, they know what to expect. When they don't, they're confused. It's like the hospital system is like a maze for so many of us. Managing expectations, providing timelines, giving them a real clear map and roadmap through diagnosis, through treatment to recovery is key. And then the patients told us that they had strategies for mitigating the financial toxicity. So here's another one of these are the kind of slides I hate at conferences, by the way. I mean, can you tell me what's going on there? Because I look at it and I'm like, I don't know what the hell that means, and you're going to change to the next slide in a minute anyway. So, but basically, I'll tell you that the dark blue, the lighter blue is what we already knew, that direct costs and indirect costs do create an objective financial burden, but the expectations of the patients had never been addressed, and that is where subjective financial distress comes into play. Patients explicitly stated that having better managed expectations about financial burdens would have resulted in better preparation, both for the objective burdens of cancer treatment by changing expectations for work and savings needed. And by the way, who has savings for cancer? I didn't. And for the subjective distress by preparing patients for the emotional toll and behavioral and material changes in lifestyle during treatment. So the patients identified these gaps. Incorrect expectations about how treatment would affect client finances, and to request clarity as much as possible, or expected costs and timeline. Exploring the ways to manage cancer treatment expectations through decision aids or allied health providers, and that's something that we at the Pink Fund are doing now. And here's what one patient says, 41-year-old Black college-educated woman, I wish I'd known what kind of money I would have been expected to pay. With that, I could have been something I would have been saving for. If I had known something like that and had savings for medical expenses, then that's something that would have been a big help. And Dr. Jagsy says this, the first steps for clinical practice and policy are clear. All physicians must assess patients for financial toxicity and learn how to communicate effectively about it. And this is the key piece. To cure a patient's disease at the cost of financial ruin falls short of the physician's duty to serve, and failure to recognize and mitigate a patient's financial distress is no longer acceptable. And I'm sure that many of you understand and live with that every single day in your practices. The second gap was the lack of provider conversations about finances, and discussing early that finances can be an issue during treatment. And a possible strategy for mitigation would be investigate ways to provide conversations and identify value concordant ways to better inform patients on financial implications of treatment at the optimal time, which is at the beginning when you receive the diagnosis and treatment plan. And so this woman tells us, is this up here? What does that even say? Okay, here we go. From the beginning, absolutely, it is the time to mention financial strain related to treatment. As soon as you're diagnosed and you go in there and they give you that packet, I remember that packet, you probably all give out those packets, right? That is what we're going to do next. They should give you the information to say, I know this is overwhelming, but here's some information just for you to have. You may not need it, but just in case, we give it to everybody. We can't be making decisions about patients' financial distress on how they're dressed or how they present in clinic. We really need to treat everybody equally. And I don't know about you, but I've made a lot of wrong impressions on people from the first time I see them. And I think that happens in the healthcare system. So the next gap was the inability to identify financial resources. And this is really true. I mean, I think some of our software programs now that we've talked about the last 2 days provide those solutions to providers and patients, and we need more of that. The issue is, unless the patient is not even assessed, but just that conversation happens at diagnosis and treatment, you're not going to get them there until it's too late. Often some of the women that come to the Pink Fund for treatment or for financial assistance have completed treatment, and are no longer eligible for our funds. So they need to seek out outside assistance outside of medicine. So a lot of what I heard here, which was so interesting, is just the inability to get the medication to the patient in a timely fashion that they can afford, and not all of you dealing with different entities to make that happen. I was so completely blown away in some of the sessions, and one of the navigators stood up and talked about her provider wouldn't allow her to hire a half-time patient navigator. And I boldly said, well, then I think you need to stand up and quit and take your experience and all that you've done and accomplished in this healthcare system someplace else. I find that our providers don't really understand what is happening to the people in the trenches, to the workers, to the nurses, to the navigators, to the physicians. The people in the C-suite are in their ivory towers, and I know this for sure because my brother-in-law was CFO of Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and we had lots of discussions about his inability to understand what was going on in clinic. In my opinion, people in the C-suite have not developed the empathy gene. They don't get it. If I was running a healthcare system, their bonus would be tied to being in clinic every single week for a different disease state. And this patient says, well, I wish I'd known about the financial advisor from the beginning. Many hospitals don't even have a financial advisor because I would find out about her, I was halfway through treatment, and then it was too late. I was so impressed by Mike Karasik, and I hope I pronounced his name right, and Alina Health System and what they've done in their business model to improve financial navigation and the outcomes that showed the benefit to the patient and to the provider. And we've heard this over and over. When the system makes the investment in navigating the patient, the financial toxicity is mitigated for both the patient and the provider. This lady tells us, we had to ask for help a lot. My mom really helped and really had to pull family in to help as best they could, I think. But when we heard the system about caregiving, we know that so many people come alongside patients to provide the support that they can't get within the healthcare system. And then finally, this lack of support in navigating healthcare. Patients said they would like to have a support group or get the help of allied professionals. They wanted to be easily able to identify, promote, and improve key resources of community support during cancer treatment, as well as investigate optimal means to deploy allied health professionals. And I do have to say that everything I'm sharing with you today is not limited to oncology. Every single disease state, you will probably get very similar feedback from patients who are frustrated and confused and trying to get through the maze of the healthcare system to get well. So this is one I'm not sure I agree with, the advice. I think I would definitely advise a group or a Facebook page, a website, or something where they can go to talk with other women who've been through it. I think you learn more when you connect with other women that are going through it or have been through it. Mainly just let them know there's people out there to help them. And that's what the advocates do. I have to say, I think you have to be very careful about talking about your health on social media. I've seen this backfire on people in many ways, where the employer finds out they're in cancer treatment and they find a way to terminate them without letting them know what they knew. Or people who are denied a health insurance policy because there was a look back on their social pages and they found out they had a health issue, a pre-existing condition. So at the Pink Fund, what we're doing is providing our Real Hope Now education program. Oh, going back here, sorry, reverse. Is it gonna reverse? Okay, this is C. Oh, there we go. And this is at our booth outside, and you can also email us, Molly, M-O-L-L-Y, at thepinkfund.org to get copies of that. So in Detroit, we have a physician, Rana Oddish, who became the patient. She wrote this amazing page-turning book called In Shock, where she described her challenges within the system getting the treatment she needed for her HELP syndrome. And she gives a lot of suggestions at the end of the book, ways in which the provider setting can be improved. But this is what she says that really applies to all of you as advocates and navigators and very caring healthcare professionals. Dr. Adish says, we cannot define success as beating death because death cannot be beaten. The undeniable fact of death remains imposing and impending, regardless of our temporary victories. How we care for each other during life is the true restoration, the definition of agency. That is the win, the success we must look for and mark and define ourselves by. Our ability to be present with each other through our suffering is what we are meant to do. It is what feeds us when the darkness inevitably looms. We cannot avoid the darkness, just as we cannot evade suffering. Loving each other through the darkness is the thing to look for and to mark. It's there in the shadows where we find meaning and purpose. And is there where you all stand in the shadows and in the darkness with the patients and their families. And it is you all who give them meaning, purpose, and redemptive hope. Thank you. That's it. Anybody want to know about my ex-husbands? Both lawyers, still living, all former boyfriends, deceased. Not fair, right?
Thank you so much, Molly. Give her a round of applause again, everybody.
It's awful. Okay. Oh, there's my...
We're not done yet. We're going to take a quick break, guys. I'm going to ask you guys to head on over to the exhibit hall again. Take this time to reconnect with everybody. Make sure you got your numbers. It's like speed dating over there, only for healthcare advocates. To connect with our exhibitors, chat with the Pink Fund, chat with everybody anybody who's up in our panels. And we will be back at 12 o'clock for the Advocate of the Year Award. And EJ is going to help me